I am currently recording on my cell phone, turns out Pazira can still rip the audio off my cell phone, even though my computer otherwise does not know what to do with it. So that's why it sounds different. Today we're talking about David and Jonathan. You can't talk about homosexuality and the Bible without at least mentioning David and Jonathan. The relationship record starts in 1 Samuel chapter 18, right after David has defeated Goliath. When David finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day, and David did not return to his father's house. Then Jonathan makes a covenant because of this love, and Jonathan basically strips himself and hands the articles to David. Stripped himself of his robe and armor, and even his sword, bow, and belt. The King James Version uses the term garments in addition to the robe, and even to his sword, bow, and his girdle. I suppose girdle and belt are the same thing, but given the expression, gird your loins, I'm not quite sure what that word actually refers to. It sounds like girding your loins. It sounds almost like the ancient version of underwear. Anyway, garments plural, his robe, his weapons, the very symbols of Jonathan's power. Jonathan is the prince. So this is a big deal. If this were a scene between a man and a woman, would we say this is just platonic? Time goes on, David becomes a mighty warrior, and his popularity is a bit of a threat to Saul's throne. So Saul begins to plan to kill David. Saul has a number of attempts. Jonathan keeps warning David and saving him. Jonathan and David meet in secret. Jonathan begs David to come back. David's afraid for his life, so they made a plan that Jonathan would go home and try to figure out how deep his father's resolve is. When he puts his plan into action, Saul, in his anger, uses an interesting insult. Saul says to Jonathan, "Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness?" This is the language of sex shaming. Saul is outright saying that Jonathan is doing something that is bringing sexual shame on his family. The King James Version uses the word confusion instead of shame, but still uses the of thy mother's nakedness, so still refers to something sexual. And I am reminded how often people are said to be sexually confused when they are attracted to a member of the same sex. So Jonathan leaves the dinner table, very angry, and has to go tell David the sad news. David and Jonathan kiss each other, and they weep with each other. Maybe they knew they would never meet again. But Jonathan reminded David of their covenant with each other, that even if they could not be together, they had a pledge, and the bond between them would last through all generations. All their children and grandchildren would be like one family. David went into hiding, and the rest of 1 Samuel is basically about him hiding and still slowly coming to power. And Jonathan is killed in battle alongside his father. And later, much later, in 2 Samuel chapter 9, we find David does adopt Jonathan's one surviving son. The son of Jonathan becomes the son of David by adoption. When David hears, in the very beginning of 2 Samuel chapter 1, when David hears that Saul and Jonathan were killed in battle, he tears his clothes and fasts and writes a song that he commands all Judah to sing. The song contains the words, "Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women." King James echoes that. So this is interesting. On one hand, David does call Jonathan brother. On the other hand, Jonathan's love passed the love of women. There is one other thing, and I heard this through the grapevine so long ago, but let's put it out there. Before Saul is outright trying to kill David, when he's still being sneaky about it, he tries to marry off his younger daughter as a snare to David. I was told that this verse was translated incorrectly. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." The footnote has Hebrew by two. I was told the by two should have come later in the sentence, so that it would actually say, "You shall now be my son-in-law by two." In this, the King James may be closer. Wherefore Saul said to David, "Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the twain." This might be another recognition of the relationship between David and Jonathan, said at a time when Saul was not speaking in anger. But we already have enough to ask some questions. Jonathan strips his clothes and gives them to David. Saul uses the language of sexual shame when accusing Jonathan about his relationship to David. And we have David's